13, our topic is sick occupational illnesses. Occupational illnesses are not as easily identified as are injuries. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there were 4 million injuries and illnesses reported in 2004. Of this November, only 249,000 cases of occupational illnesses were reported. The 249,000 occupational illnesses included repeat traumas such as carpal tunnel syndrome, noise-induced hearing loss, and poisonings. It may professional opinion that many occupational illnesses go unreported when the employer or workers is not able to link exposure with the symptoms. The employee's physician fails to ask right question regarding the patient's employment history, which can lead to the commonest diagnosis of a cold or flu. This has become very apparent with the recent occupational exposure to anthrax, where a physician sent a worker home with anthrax without addressing potential occupational exposure hazard. Unless the physician is trained in occupational medicine, he or she seldom addresses work as potential exposure. Identifying health hazard. Health-related hazard must be identified, recognized, evaluated, and controlled to prevent occupational illnesses that come from exposure to them. Health-related hazard come in a variety of forms such as chemical, physical, ergonomic, or biological. Chemical hazard arise from excessive airborne concentration of mist before gases or solid that are in the form of dust or fumes. Number 1. Chemical hazard arise from excessive airborne concentration of mist before gases or solid that are in the form of dust or fumes. Number 2. Physical hazard include excessive levels of non-ionizing and ionizing radiation, noise, vibrations, and extremes of temperatures and pressure. Number 3. Ergonomic hazard includes improperly designed tools or works areas, improper lifting or reaching. Number 4. Biological hazard include insects, molds, fungi, viruses, vermins, bird rats, mice, and etc. Temperature extremes. Cold stress. Temperature is measured in degrees Fahrenheit or Celsius. Most people feel comfortable when the air temperature ranges from 66 Celsius Fahrenheit to 17 degrees Celsius Fahrenheit, and the relative humidity is about 45%. Under the circumstances, heat production inside the body equals the heat loss from the body, and the internal body temperature is kept around 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit for constant body temperature. Even under changing environmental conditions, rates of heat gain and heat loss should balance. Health stress. Operation involving high air temperature, radiant heat sources, high humidity, direct physical contact with hot object, or strenuous physical activities have a high potential for inducing heat stress in employees engaged in such operations. Such places include iron and steel foundries, non-ferrous foundries, braking, firing, and ceramic plants, glass product facilities, rubber products, factories, electrical utilities, particularly boiler rooms.
What is non-ionizing? Non-ionizing radiation refers to electromagnetic radiation that lacks sufficient energy to remove tightly bound electrons from. What is non-ionizing? Non-ionizing radiation refers to electromagnetic radiation that lacks sufficient energy to remove tightly bound electrons from atoms of break chemical bonds, thereby not causing DNA damage or genetic mutations. Types of non-ionizing. Number 1. Radio frequency, RF radiation, cell phones, microwaves, radio, televisions. Number 2. Microwave. microwave ovens, wireless communication system. Number 3, infrared radiation, heat lamps, thermal imaging cameras. Number 4, visible light, sunlight, LED lights, lasers. Number 5, ultraviolet radiation, non-ionizing portion, sunlight, UV lamps, black lights. Number 6, extremely low frequency radiation, power lines, electrical appliances. Example of non-ionizing radiation sources: cell phones and smartphones, microwave ovens, television and computer screens, radio and wireless speakers, infrared heaters and thermal cameras, LED lights and lasers, Wi-Fi routers and Bluetooth devices, medical imaging, radar system, smart home device. Health effects. While non-ionizing radiation is generally considered safer than ionizing radiation, prolonged exposure to high levels may still cause heating effects, eye damage, skin burns, potential carcinogenic effects. However, the World Health Organization and other reputable health organizations have established guidelines and safety limits for non-ionizing radiation exposure. Health hazards. Health hazards are caused by any chemical or biological exposure that interacts adversely with organs within our body, causing illnesses or injuries. The majority of chemical exposure result from inhaling chemical contaminants in the form of vapors, gases, dust, fumes, and mist, or by skin absorption of these materials. Acute health effects. Chemicals are cause acute or chronic effects. Whether or not chemical causes an acute or chronic reaction depends on both the chemical and the dust you are exposed to. Acute effects are seen quickly, usually after exposures to high concentrations of hazardous material. A dry cleaning solvent, perchlorine, can immediately cause dizziness, nausea, and a higher level, coma, and health. Most acute effects are temporary and reverse shortly after the individual is removed from the exposure. Chronic health effects. A chronic exposure occurs during longer or repeated periods of contact, sometimes over a year, and often at relatively low concentrations of exposure. Perchlorine or alcohol, for example, may cause liver damage or other cancer 10 to 40 years after first exposure. This period between first exposure and the development of the disease is called the latency period. An exposure to a substance may cause adverse health effects many years from now, when with little or no effects at the time of exposure. It is important to avoid or eliminate all exposure to chemicals that are not part of normal ambient breathing air. For many chemical agents, the toxic effects following a single exposure are quite different from those produced by repeated exposure. For example, the primary acute toxic effect of benzene is central nervous system damage, while chronic exposure can result in leukemia. Chronic diseases. Chronic disease is not always cancer. Many other types of chronic diseases can be as serious as cancer. The chronic diseases affect the function of different organs of the body. For example, chronic exposure, asbestos or silica dust, causes scarring of the lung. Hazardous chemicals. Hazardous are toxic substances and be defined as chemicals present in the workplace that are capable of causing harm. In this definition, the term chemicals includes dust, mixtures, and common materials such as paints, fuel, and solvents. Currently regulates exposure to approximately 400 substances. Biological monitoring. Biological monitoring is the analysis of body systems such as blood, urine, fingernails, teeth, etc., which provide us baseline level of contaminants in the body. Medical testing can have several different purposes, depending on why the worker is visiting a doctor. If it is an employment examination, it is usually considered a baseline to use as a reference for future medical testing. Baselines are valuable tool to measure the amount of toxic substances in the body and often give an indication of the effectiveness of PPE.
Hazardous communication standard. HCS is one of the most often cited standards by OSHA is found in 29 CFR 1910 1200 and 29 CFR 1926 59. The basic goal of hazard communication programs is to be sure employers and employees know about work hazards and how to protect themselves. This should help to reduce the incidence of chemical source illness and injuries. The following information will walk you through comply with other OSHA standard. OSHA has estimated that more than 32 million workers are exposed to 650,000 hazardous chemicals products in more than 330,000 American workplaces. This poses serious problems for exposed workers and their employers. Chemicals pose a wide range of health hazards such as irritation, sensation, and carcinogenicity, and physical hazards such as flammability, corrosion, and reactivity. OSHA is designed to ensure that information about these hazards and associated protective measures is disseminated to workers and employers. This is accomplished by requiring chemicals manufacturers and importers to evaluate the hazards of the chemicals they produce or import and to provide information about them through labels on chips, containers, and more detailed information sheets calls MSDS all employers with hazardous chemicals in their workplace must prepare and implement a writing hazard communication program and must ensure that all containers are labeled. Employees are provided access to MSDS in an effective training program is conduct for all potentially exposed employers. See appendix. The HCS provides workers the right to know the hazards and identities of the chemicals they are exposed to in workplace. When workers have this information, they can effectively participate in their employers' protective programs and take steps to protect themselves. In addition, that standards give employers the information they need to design and implement an effective protective programs. Reduction of chemical source illnesses and injuries in American workplace. Protections under OSHA HCS includes all workers exposed to hazardous chemicals in all industry sectors. This standards is based on a simple concept. The employees have both a need and a right to know the hazards and the identities of the chemicals they are exposed to when working. They also need to know what protective measures are available to prevent adverse effects for occurring. Occupational illnesses. The HCS covers both physical hazards such as flammability or the potential for explosions and health hazards, including both acute and chronic effects, by making information available to employers and employees about these hazards and recommended precautions for safe use. Proper implementation of the SAS will result in a reduction of illnesses and injuries caused by chemicals. Employers will have the information they need to design an appropriate protective programs. Employees will be better able to participate in their programs effectively when they understand the hazards involved and to take steps to protect themselves. Together, this employer and employee action will prevent the occurrence of adverse effects caused by the use of chemicals in the workplace. The SAS established uniform requirements to make sure that the hazards of all chemicals imported into produced or used in United States workplace are evaluated and that this hazards information is transmitted to affected employees.